Hi, and welcome to another edition of Rider Rumblings. We've got a new angle this week. The Rough Riders won a game. They they won at Edmonton on Saturday night, and our man Murray McCormick was there. Good morning, Murray, or good afternoon, Murray, depending
Good
upon what
afternoon.
time you're watching this podcast. Good evening.
Yeah. Welcome back, Rob. Hope you had a nice break. But I think
I did. Lots of bike riding and dog walking and everything I do that's not very exciting.
I was in Edmonton, and I just want to lead this off with since I'm covering the Riders since 2008, I never thought I'd go to Commonwealth Stadium and see less than 20,000 people for a Rider game on a Saturday, regardless of the 8 o'clock kickoff. And that just stunned me. And still, I look out all the empty seats, and they made a lot of noise.
What do you think the crowd actually was?
Well, they told me the last game there was 12,000, so I think it's such a huge stadium, maybe 15, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a problem that's, it's affecting pretty much everybody in the Canadian Football League. Yeah. It's kind of scary.
And the thing is, you go to Commonwealth now, it's still a beautiful stadium, but it's dated. Like, you can't walk around the stadium and see, like you can do it and still watch the game. It's still all blocked off and things like that. So they've got this, it's still a great stadium. I love the sight lines. I love going there and everything like that, but it's just not up to the standards that we expect anymore in stadiums, I think. So maybe that might be contributing, but I remember, Rob, I would go to Edmonton. One time I went to the West Edmonton Mall, and all I saw were people in green and white jerseys because they're all going to the game, and they go to the game. A little better kickoff time, I have to say. An 8 o'clock kickoff time out west isn't great, but TV rules, and you want to have a doubleheader, you got to give up something along those lines to accommodate it. But it just maybe the World Juniors was attracting more attention than I watched one of their.
But they're not even filling the lower bowl.
No, so there's just the world of sports has changed, Rob. You and I, maybe sellouts are a thing of the past in sports. I don't know. Maybe unless you go to Toronto. Maybe, and for hockey, as one person said to me, goes, they're just biding time till the Oilers open training camp, which is
that's pretty much it. And the CFL across the board needs to push its product more aggressively. Yeah. The teams do, the league does. They think they're doing it, they're not. They do so much within their existing social media platforms, etc., and websites. Well, guess what? You're preaching to the choir there. They need to get out and look for new ways to engage with fans, and they've got an ambitious owner in Victor Cui in Edmonton who's trying a lot of things. But when you look at those crowds, it does get worrisome, and it's we've seen the crowds here, and there's really no comparison between what the Rough Riders announce and how many people there are actually in the game. Now, they announce the number of tickets sold. I'd love to know what the actual bums and seats count is. The Labor Day Classic still isn't sold out. Usually they've announced this. Yeah. They've announced the sellout well before now. But this was happening to the Rough Riders before the pandemic. We saw the 2019 season when they were in first place and attendance went down from the previous year. Mm-hmm. The pandemic, I think, has really complicated a lot of things, but this was happening, and they were whistling past the graveyard. They didn't think it was going to be a big issue, and now it's becoming a sustainability issue with the Canadian Football League. And it's too bad. You look at some of the games this season; they've been tremendous. Last year, you could say it was a product.
Yep.
How many games last year were worth watching? Even on Saturday, the Rough Riders put in a middling performance, but it was still an exciting game with some drama at the end. And preceding that was a classic between Calgary and BC. The product, you can't say that people aren't entertained, but what you can say is that there aren't enough people in person being entertained anymore. And that is such a key part of the model. They can't just lean on TV contracts like Major League Baseball and the National Football League, NBA. They need people going to their games. It's not happening, and I don't think they're doing enough to entice people to go.
You know what I find interesting, Rob? There were probably as many social media people with the Elks on Saturday as there was working media.
Yeah, look at the press box. Look at the press box at Mosaic too. Like it's 2/3 empty now.
Yeah, well,
it's my jokes.
We counted 4 like working media, like guys working for media that day, not bloggers and stuff like that. Like that's crazy. And I just, as it were kind of, you and I have been around for many years. We remember the old Taylor Field press box. We'd be almost shoulder to shoulder And when you go up, you line up for food. The lineup for food to be halfway around the stadium almost.
But you were always first in that line.
That's true.
Sorry.
Well, look, you got to gain somewhere, can't you? But anyway, that's not really what we're here to talk about. But also, I think I jumped all over our introduction. So I'll say we have Rob Vanstone. He's the sports editor for the Regina Leader Post. Long time.
And my dog.
And a dog. Long time Leader Post employee and sports guy and diehard book writer and stuff. And I'm Murray McCormick. I've covered the Rider Beat since 2008. Only been around the Leader Post since 1985. So I've been here a while, and we're here to talk Rider Rumblings. How's that for an intro, Rob? A little late, but
beautiful. Yeah, we deferred intro, but what the heck? We got down to business a little late, but so did the Rough Riders on Saturday. There's so much to unravel from that game last week. What I find interesting and perhaps alarming is that Cody Fajardo threw a game-winning touchdown pass on Saturday. Is getting absolutely no credit for it.
Exactly.
I keep hearing Cody this. He threw a game-winning touchdown pass. He directed a game-winning touchdown drive. And then he scored an insurance touchdown after that, aided and abetted by a questionable call. But I don't know. I wonder if this Cody Fajardo situation is going to become so big that he just can't win and this team can't win. People are determined to pile on Cody no matter what. And I think Saturday was a classic example of that. Did he have a great game? No. Did he throw a bad interception? Yes. But what did he do after the bad interception? He directed a game-winning touchdown drive. And he seems to be getting absolutely no credit for it. And I don't know. I think there's kind of a toxic environment in Rider Nation that just is not healthy.
No one, speaking of healthy, but no one's talking about the fact that he ran and looked almost like his former self. There wasn't a limp. He had speed. He had explosiveness. What did he have? 8 carries for 56 yards, Rob, or something? 10 or 8 or 10, something in that neighborhood. I was counting on you to remember the numbers. But he do, as I like to say, his Fajardian spinorama moves. He spun his way out of trouble. He outraced defenders to the sideline so he wouldn't get hit. He got hit a couple times and got up fine. So I'm kind of thinking with other quarterbacks to be a celebration that this guy who's had nothing but injury problems since the week 2 seems to be over them. And now we're going to see what happens at practice to see how sore he is now, because I have a feeling that he might be a little bit banged up, but we'll see what happens on that front. But, and there's no
8 carries for 51 yards.
8 carries. So I was close. I was in the...
And 2 touchdowns.
So why aren't we talking about that instead? And I know the bye week was one, and you mentioned the word toxic is so apt for that one. I thought that was one of the ugliest bye weeks I've been around here. And I've been around here since 2015. Some of these horrible starts on bye weeks and people, but everyone just cards everything on the team, well, except for the defense. The defense gets lots of accolades and well-deserved, because that wasn't a great defensive effort in the first half, but boy, did they turn it up in the second half.
Yeah, all 4 sacks in the second half.
Yeah, so
Jason Shivers makes adjustments.
Yes.
I'm not sure what's being done on the offensive side of the ball, but maybe that's toxic too.
I remember a long time ago, Paul LaPolice took me aside once because that's back when he was being accused of not making any halftime adjustments. And he showed me, he says, you don't really make a lot of adjustments. You make subtle ones. And he showed me his sheet and stuff. And maybe halftime adjustments are a little bit overrated, but the Riders had to decide. And they had 30 extra minutes because there was that lightning delay that they gave them 15 extra minutes to kind of get things settled down. So the defense made adjustments and the offense. But we also have to keep perspective, Rob. I think it's the Elks. That's a team very similar to 16 when Chris Jones came here. And took a while to get things going, and it did. But boy, Taylor Cornelius looked pretty good. Hey, didn't you think? Could run?
Well, running the ball he did. Passing the ball he did.
Passing the ball,
especially good.
You guys wouldn't have believed how windy it was. And it was one time I looked up, and at one end of the end zone, the flags are almost straight out. At the other, with the goalpost beside us, the two little orange flags at the top of the goalpost weren't even moving.
So that's the thing too. Like, there's a lot of commentary about Cody, but what you don't get a sense of when you're watching on television is the degree to which the wind is impacting the throws. I don't want to keep making excuses for him. I think he needs to play better. He's acknowledged that, but I don't think this is the disaster that some people are painting it as being. And I don't know. I just don't know what he has to do. And I watch him play behind that offensive line, and there's times he's bailing out when there isn't pressure. And I just wonder if there's enough confidence in that offensive line. And people are criticizing Cody perhaps for having happy feet in the pocket. Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Playing behind that line?
Yeah.
I mean, Edmonton's rushing 3 guys, and they're getting pressure. They rush 3, plus they have a blitzer, and he isn't picked up by any of the offensive linemen, and he gets home. Even you don't have to blitz to get pressure on the Rough Riders. You don't even need to send 4 guys. And I wonder if it's like having an unfaithful partner. And let's say that this partner isn't cheating on you, but aren't you looking over your shoulder anyway because you know that might happen? And I wonder if that's somewhat remotely analogous to the Cody Fajardo situation, in that with that offensive line, you just can't be sure. And I think there has to be awareness when you're in the pocket, and maybe you're seeing or hearing ghosts. And the failure to reinforce that offensive line ultimately could bring down this entire season.
But what can they do?
And that's on Jeremy O'Day.
What can they do now, though?
They can't do it now, but that's an off-season failure. It's a total off-season failure for Jeremy O'Day and Paul Jones.
But it's an off-season failure, Rob, because they set their priorities.
They knew, but where were their priorities? They knew they had a bad offensive line. They did nothing to fix it. It's worse.
Yeah, it's worse. But they set a priority: re-signing Duke Williams, getting Sankey, getting Moncrief, and getting these other guys. Because the linebacking core,
which is nice, but they can't protect their marquee player.
No, and
they couldn't do it last. They couldn't do it last year, and they're worse this year.
I'm trying to remember how many marquee offensive linemen there are out there to really would have adapted this. And we kind of thought you don't need free agents. Go find one. There's tons of American offensive linemen coming out of the NCAA, former NFL players, whatever. That's where you get a lot of the players who enter the Canadian Football League. You don't have to do it by a free agency. Is there not somebody out there who's better than what they've been putting out there on the field? And they seem to have no solution for it. They signed Jamal Campbell. They aren't playing him. And Natai Rogers now has 14 penalties. He has 3 games with 3 penalties. He's allowed a sack in 3 consecutive games, and he keeps playing. How could they not have seen this coming during the offseason? And how could they have whiffed so monumentally in fixing this? There was one,
too. And Cody gets all the heat. Yeah. Cody Fajardo gets all the heat.
There's also one play where, sorry, I didn't, my email beeped. I'm sorry about that, Rob. There's also one play where he tackled a guy. I'm trying to remember the play where Cody rolled out to one of the sidelines and Rogers just literally tackled the guy down. So, but I know it's just, but we get accused of having Cody blinders on. You know that as well as I do. I was out golfing with the guy yesterday, and he said, well, how can you guys keep defending Cody Fajardo? Why don't they get somebody different? I said, who are they going to get? Right now, how do you get another quarterback at the halfway pole of the season to come in and do? They don't
need to get anybody else. I go back to 1979, and Tom Clements comes to Saskatchewan and is playing behind an offensive line that actually, last time I checked, had allowed fewer sacks over. Tom Clements played 7 games in Saskatchewan, and was sacked 21 times. Fewer times than Cody Fajardo was sacked over his first 7 games this season. Tom Clements came here looking very much like a Hall of Fame player. He'd already won a Grey Cup with the Ottawa Rough Riders. All of a sudden, he's playing behind a bad offensive line. He plays 7 games, 2 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. Mercifully is traded to the Hamilton Tiger Cats and resumes playing like the Hall of Famer that he proved to be. So Tom Clements, already a Grey Cup champion, a future Hall of Famer, 7 games with Saskatchewan behind a bad offensive line, 2 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. Cody Fajardo playing behind an offensive line in 2022 that is arguably, and I think quantifiably worse, yet 10 touchdown passes in 8 starts this season. So Tom Clements, Hall of Famer, 2 touchdown passes, 11 interceptions. Cody Fajardo, 10 touchdown passes, more, and the touchdown passes outnumber the interceptions. I mean, I don't think you can spell it out any more plainly than that. It's Cody. Obviously, there's plays he can make that aren't being made, but what he's doing behind this offensive line, I would argue, is more of a testament to Cody Fajardo than grounds for criticizing the starting quarterback. He's doing it with no protection. And nothing
How
was
do you
done to fix this.
how do you deal with the underthrows, Rob? That's the one that, you kind of like some of the passes that should be darts are throwing a bit of an arc or a little bit behind the guy. Even the pass to Duke Williams is a little bit behind. I don't think it was behind the shoulder or to the backside shoulder. I think it was just a little bit behind him, and Duke being the receiver he is, he could come back. Doesn't that concern you that the passes don't seem to have the zip and they don't seem to be like, with that one pass with Duke, if he throws it on the line, Duke scores.
Yeah, it's a touchdown.
That's a touchdown, but he throws a bit of an arc. So those are the things that kind of like what's going on with that? Is that knee related? Is that like having never thrown a pass that was on a dart? I wonder what's going on there.
Look at the pass where he underthrew Duke Williams on what proved to be the game-winning touchdown drive. That has been frequently cited. What I'm not hearing as often is on 2nd and 10, Cody Fajardo throws about as great a pass as he's ever thrown. On a dig route to Keon Schaefer-Baker for 22 yards and a first down. Tremendous throw. There was no margin for error with that pass. And that's a 2nd and 10 pass. Now, if he doesn't make that completion, what is the discussion this week? And so, yeah, there's some throws that need to be better. I'm not painting him as Kent Austin, Darian Durant, Kerry Joseph, Ron Lancaster, Glenn Dobbs, or even Tom Burgess at this point. But when you look at the circumstances he's facing, I would argue that they're circumstances that none of the aforementioned quarterbacks ever had to face, and that few quarterbacks in Rough Riders history have had to face, because very seldom has there been an offensive line that is this bad. And what he is doing with that line in front of him is borderline miraculous. And yet all I hear is, why aren't they playing Dola Gala? Like it is so ludicrous.
Is it the whole offensive line, Rob? Are we maybe just the tackles that seem to be the absolute
No, I mean,
issue?
Logan Bandy had a chance to get in the way of the blitzer on Saturday. Jeff Fairholm sent out a tweet with a video with a screen capture. I mean, it does not help that they've been through 3 centers this year. You had in your report card today that right guard Evan Johnson has not performed at an especially high level. I think Logan Furlan's had a decent year, but he's not Brendan Labatt at left guard. And I think the offensive line as a whole is a problem. But the tackles, it should theoretically be easier to find an American tackle than a Canadian interior offensive lineman. And sometimes it's easy to look at the tackles because they're playing on an island. The guards aren't necessarily in that same position, so maybe it's some of their errors are overlooked. But you look at the tackle situation, and it has to be better, and it isn't. And they had all off season to fix this. Have I mentioned that yet?
Jim, I was listening to one of the talk shows yesterday, and Jim Hobson, who was a former offensive lineman and president of the Rough Riders, mentioned a good point that a lot of time with Rogers, he's pushing the guys inside. So that means the pressure's on the guard to help out the tackle instead of running them outside of the offensive line in at the quarterbacks. And that's a point to think about that, Rogers. If you think about how many guys have gotten on his inside shoulder, so there's a pressure on Evan Johnson to have to block him and stuff. So all the issues, like, I know, I kind of wonder what we're going to see this week. Do they stick Jamal in there and just say enough is enough? But there's not enough time. How much time? Like, I know you got to be next man up.
If they've got 9 games into the season and have concluded that Jamal Campbell isn't good enough to start by now, what is miraculously going to happen between now and then to make him a better player or make this decision more obvious to them?
Does it appease Rider Nation, Rob? Does it give? I don't think they care about appeasing Rider Nation.
They don't make decisions to appease the fans or the media, nor should they. I think they're basically stuck with what they've got, and somehow it needs to be better. I don't know if it means, do you need Albert Awachi and James Tuck in there at all times? Do you need to put a spike belt behind the offensive line to trip up opposing players? Honestly, they have got to schematically work around it because I think they're stuck with what they've got. You might be able to get some NFL cuts, but by the time you get them and they filter through the system, I think you're well into September, and there's so few games left in the regular season. We're already at the halfway point, midway through August, that what can really be done? Once upon a time in 1997, Andrew Green came back from the NFL and was an impactful player and helped the Rough Riders get to the Grey Cup in '97. I'm not sure that there's going to be that answer, but they'd better be looking for one. Jeremy O'Day has been down at NFL camps. you would hope that he'd be flanked on the flight back with a couple of
Yeah.
320-pound tackles.
What Jeremy O'Day's been under a great deal of criticism, and I think that's it. But can we throw a little bit of credit towards him, the fact that he traded for Mario Alford, who's he made that dumb play where he came out of the end zone and cost us safety, and that seemed to be the catalyst towards the Lions win. But what a pickup! Like a missed field goal return, a great play, another one. So they needed a position there. They needed to do something. They needed to take some of the workload off of Jamal Morrow and Frankie Hickson, and they get Alfred. And what an acquisition! That was a great. He's made 2.5 momentum changing plays, and I think so. Maybe give him credit. He did make an in-season move that worked. And getting
and I mean, he's one kick return and one punt return touchdown shy, becoming the first Rough Rider to have returned kicks for the cycle in a season for a touchdown, punt return, kickoff return, and missed field goal return. And he's had 3 punt return touchdowns in his career. So you get the feeling over the last 9 games he's probably going to get that one. That was a tremendous pickup by Jeremy O'Day. And you mentioned the free agent additions and what the kind of linebacking core that they have. They made a lot of good moves. It's just the moves that they didn't make are the ones that may come back to haunt them. That was the smoking gun coming out of last season, and they knew it. And I just don't see that it's any better. And we're talking about a lot of the same offensive line issues and a lot of the same offense issues that we were belaboring last year. That gets old pretty quickly.
Offensive line.
So do we.
4-5 at the break. I can't remember what we discussed. 5-4. God, dyslexics untie. Sorry, folks. Was that expected? I can't remember did we discuss what would have been a legitimate record at the halftime, at the midway point of the season?
This is supposedly the easy part of the season, the first half. They've faced only one top tier team, that being BC, and they ended up being humiliated by that team. They've lost 3 times to Eastern opposition. You would think they would have needed to build themselves a better buffer coming into the second half and the tougher games. This is a team that you would think would be 7-1, at worst 6-3, coming through this stretch of the season where you're playing a lot of the soup cans. And instead they're 5-4. And granted, they've got as many wins as the Calgary Stampeders. They're not entirely out of it in the West, but you watch the way that they've struggled to beat a bad Edmonton team twice. And you wonder, okay, can they compete with the teams they are now preparing to face? Infinitely tougher competition. BC Lions twice in a row, Winnipeg Blue Bombers twice in a row, Calgary twice in a row to end the season. There aren't all the free space, most of the free spaces on the bingo card are gone. They've got one more game with Edmonton. Edmonton has proven not to be a free space for the Rough Riders. So that's the thing. They just haven't built themselves any cushion, and now they're getting into these tougher games. I'm just not sure what you can realistically expect from this team.
There was a time they did have a cushion. Remember way back when they were 4-1? We kept in perspective saying they're beating up on the East Division team because everyone was beating up on the East, but they still. And I remember Craig Dickinson saying these wins count just as much in July and August as they do in October. So they did have a bit of a cushion built up, but they've completely blown it away in what they're going to do to catch up. And I think, holy smokes! Like, what can we even talk about the Rough Riders in the Grey Cup, or other than the Grey Cups here, other than that? But I mean, when you're talking crossover in August, what does that say about this team? That they can't give up on a crossover in August and make that your goal because that's not real. You and I were there one year as they tried to go the crossover. They came within one Cody Fajardo quarterback sneak of getting to the Grey Cup.
One Ricky Ray completion of James Wilder Jr. on 3rd and 5.
So until one team actually goes through the crossover and gets to the Grey Cup, it's partially realistic, but it's not the way you want to go. Like the East Division teams,
they've lost to Montreal already. They've lost twice to Toronto. So why is that? Why do you look at the crossover and think that there's really any promise there? I don't know. Maybe I'm being too gloomy about the Rough Riders prospects. Maybe they'll come out on Friday night and light it up. But honestly, they have a lot to prove. And if they can prove that they're a better team than I currently think they are, I will write that in a split second. But how do you go into the second half of the season and think that how do you think this team is going to go? They're 5-4 right now. Can you realistically think that this team's going to go 5-4 over the second 9 games, considering the caliber of the competition and how much tougher it gets? If they can,
impressive.
If they can go 5-4, that means they're taking some wins away from. They're winning a lot of 4-pointers against West Division competition, and that could stand them in very good stead as far as the West Division playoffs go. They've got to get some wins that start dragging BC and Winnipeg and ultimately Calgary down to the level where the Rough Riders can supplant them and get a home playoff game. But right now, that seems like a really tall order. They would have to go 7-2 or something to get a home playoff game at this point right now. And when you consider who they're playing, I don't know how they do it.
I think defensively they can stand up, and they're going to get healthier now. Pete Robinson's coming back. AC Leonard's coming back. Garrett Marino is going to be coming back. So they're going to be getting some of their bodies and some of their strength positions back. And so they can do, I think defensively they can help them out. But boy, defense wins championships, but you got to have an offense to set up that defense. And until that happens, I don't know. The crossover may be the thing to go. But boy, as I say, talking crossover in August is almost defeatist. You've got to be thinking.
Think of the competition. Think of the conversation we could be having if the Rough Riders hadn't beaten Edmonton on Saturday night. Then you're not talking crossover necessarily. You're talking, can they make the playoffs in any fashion? And I think that's the importance of beating Edmonton. And they squeaked by them. So yeah, it was a double-digit disparity at the end, but Edmonton has an unforced error inside the Rough Rider 10-yard line that leads to a fumble. Bit of a phantom officials call. It was everything they could do to get past Edmonton. But the fact that they've done that, they've now won the season series, and they've established some distance between themselves and Edmonton. So at least you can talk about the crossover and some entry point into the playoffs that seems to be founded in realism at this point. But had they lost that game, can you imagine? I mean, it's already been kind of an ugly week, and they won the game. Can you imagine what the tenor of the discussion would have been had they lost that game?
That pyramiding call, I've watched it over and over again, and 3 pyramiding calls in one season I've never heard of that before. And I don't even know if that was pyramiding, like whatever I understand. It looked like he just put his hand on the guy to go by. It didn't like he used it to elevate himself. But, that's what happens when you're a struggling team. Bad things happen to you. And
those things follow you around. Yeah. You're bad for a reason, and you can't separate bonehead plays and bad, bad calls sometimes and being a bad team. Sometimes those things follow you around. You put yourselves in position to have those things happen to you when you're not very good. And that's Edmonton for you right now.
But speaking of not very good and very good, I'm excited to get to see Nathan Rourke play again in real person. Yes. Like he struggled the first half against Calgary, and a struggle for him is not really, it's not the end of the world, but they're down by 17.
Struggle for him is a flurry for the Rough Riders.
I think they were down by 17 points because I had to drive I went to the stadium at one point, so I missed on.
And he'd thrown a pick six.
And then he comes back with that second half. Actually, I got to watch most of that, and it's just what has the CFL got more than him right now? Is he the story of the year? And I think Winnipeg is always going to be up there at the top, but I think Rourke's the story of the year. I think what he's doing for Canadian quarterbacks, even if he was an American quarterback, I think he'd still be drawing all this attention.
The fact that he's Canadian is almost incidental to the discussion right now. He's just so amazing. And I'm not sure how much longer he's going to be in the Canadian Football League, but this is a marketing tool that the CFL has had that they haven't had in years. And something they've got to capitalize on. And they've got to get him out there as much as they can get him out there and as widely as they can get him out there, because he's an absolute marketer's dream. And if the CFL can't capitalize on this, then they're totally inept.
I think they also have to be cautious with Rob a little bit without getting him out there too much and not overwhelming the young guy. I know he's 24, but not overwhelming him too much with all the attention and trying to work with him a little bit, but maybe, just sell the kid because he's also a great person for the league. He's a great personality for the league, and I think that'd be good to see him. But I just like watching him play. And one of the things, and I know his salaries, he's making almost like Canadian receiver money. I think about 80 grand. So you look at the BC's receiving corps with Dominic Rhymes and Brian Burnham and Keon Hatcher and Lucky White. So they have a receiving corps.
And they didn't get Kenny Lawler. They put in a big bid for Kenny Lawler.
Imagine that. Holy smokes. What would they be? Oh, they'd probably only be 7-8-0.
Javon Katoy.
Yeah, I love Javon Gakoy. I think he's one of the great Canadian receivers. I think
so. I mean, it really is an amazing thing to watch, and I mean that game on Saturday against Calgary. I mean, he just keeps raising the bars. You think, okay, Nathan Rourke's pretty much done everything you can do to make you marvel, and we're only halfway through the year, and it's like then he goes and does that. And it's one thing to do it against Edmonton and say, okay, yeah, he's fatting the stats against Edmonton, but then you do it against Calgary Stampeders, and you do it in the fashion that he did, and it's just, my goodness. And it's just one of those players there aren't a lot of players anymore where you want to see them play in person. This is a marketer's dream. I look at last year, and the most outstanding player in the league is Zach Collaros, and kudos to him, but Zach Collaros isn't going to sell any tickets. There's no buzz around that. He's been around for a while. And this is new. It's exciting. It just happens to be homegrown, and it's a phenomenon. And you would hope that's reflected in the attendance on Friday night and throughout the league.
Homegrown and American trained, though. That's always I know youth sports coaches are getting much better. We're always going to give them credit, but he went down to the States and played at a pretty good program and got pretty darn good to come up here. And the buzz right now is, can he go to the United States? Will he go to the NFL? I thought he had another year left on his contract, so I'm not quite sure, because I think rookies signed 3-year deals, so I'm not 100% sure about this. I don't know if he can go down to the States next year or not, or the Lions will stand in his way, allowing him to go try out. But I don't know. Sometimes the grass is greener at home, isn't it, Rob? Sometimes just to stay here and get everything you can from the CFL, the marketing.
You can always come back, though.
Yeah,
you can always come back.
I think quarterbacks it's a little tougher other positions. That seems to be
I think you got to take that NFL shot when it's there. I think you absolutely have to. Even if you go down there, look at Dave Dickinson. He went down to San Diego and was an afterthought. Came up here and just came back and resumed being a Hall of Famer. Ricky Ray, same thing. Henry Burris, same thing. I think you got to take your shot when it's there. If it looks like you're just not being brought in as a camp arm. Mm-hmm. And when you look at some of the you look at the lack of high caliber quarterbacking in the NFL right now. I think the circumstances are very. There's still teams you're looking at in the NFL and thinking, do they have anybody who can start? And look at Denver for a number of years until they got Russell Wilson. So I think if you're reading the climate too, you're Nathan Rourke and saying, well, they're not only am I doing very well, but they might need me down there because there's a quarterbacking crisis in the National Football League.
And it's
maybe not a crisis, but there's a lack of depth at quarterback that certainly would make that even more inviting than the allure of the National Football League would fundamentally be.
I find it interesting that Victor Q predicted Victor would the Elks would win 4 games in a row, and since he made that prediction, they're 0-2. So.
But at least he's getting out there. He's trying to create a buzz. This is what teams need to do. It's called marketing the product. It's called selling your brand. It's you look at professional boxing matches or MMA and what are they saying? I'm going to destroy my opponent. Blah 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 blah. It's all hype. It's pre-fight hype. But that's how you sell the game. That's how you get people interested. And that's how you've got your base fans who are going to go. But if you want to go beyond that fundamental season ticket total, you got to give people a reason to be intrigued about a single game purchase, and that you got to build up the game and create some drama, even if there doesn't appear to be much. And I just don't see that happening. It's we respect our opponent, and that kind of. Well, nobody's going to buy tickets to watch that. You got to create some grudge matches.
But then what happens, Rob? As soon as a guy does that, someone in the media slams him for someone can say, well, you shouldn't do that. You should be more along the straight lines. Blinders on, one day at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 game at a time. We're 1-0. We're just 0-0 and stuff. And we hear it all the time. You always, how many times have we heard that? And it'd be kind of nice to have that sort of, that hype it up thing, but it's not going to happen in football. The coaches are too locked down and just trying to win the game.
And then they wonder why they have empty seats. Yeah. And they attribute it to so many factors maybe they need to look more inwardly and think, are we doing enough to sell our product? I don't think it's happening across the Canadian Football League, and it's been a argument I think one could make for decades, and it's no different now. Although they've certainly had plenty of reasons to be alarmed, and certainly there's been, after coming out of the pandemic, I think there was every incentive for them to be more proactive and assertive than ever. And to me, it seems to be the same old songbook and the same old tunes.
Well, it was funny when I was walking into Commonwealth Stadium. I was there a little early because I don't know why, it wasn't any traffic. I said to the reporter I was with, is there a game on today? Where's all the people? There was no, and there was a little bit of a tailgating thing at the end of the stadium that I picked on. They had a band playing. I'm really looking forward to going to Vancouver to BC next week and seeing what the Lions are doing to sell out, to pump up their games. They're doing pre-game DJs and stuff, and they've always done a little bit of that. I think they've really kind of accelerated. I think the Riders do a pretty good job. I think we have to give them credit of selling the pre-game party in the park and all those kind of things, and getting kids in there and doing stuff. So they do a good job of that too. So there is some of it taking place, but I don't think there's enough taking place. I don't know what you do to Toronto people unless you grab them off the street and lock the gates behind them and let them out somehow. Because Toronto has as good as a pre-game product as I've seen, and a great game product, in-game product that should be entertaining, but just doesn't seem to draw people. And what Gary Stern is doing in Montreal is that kind of hyping it up, kind of, guaranteeing wins and those kind of things. But some people make fun of them rather than saying, let's just get in the spirit of things. We're going to have some fun. We're going to
It's sports.
predict
this
wins.
Isn't life or death. I mean, have some fun with it. They treat it like it's this militaristic mindset about it. It's sports, and you're fundamentally in the business of selling tickets. So go do it.
Yeah.
You have nobody to blame but yourselves if people don't show up, because you can't say the product's not good this year. It's exceptional, and you've got stars in this league. You've got people that fans should go and want to see, but you got to do everything possible to entice them to get there. And I just don't see that all stops are being pulled out to do that. Mm-hmm. And we can have the same discussion 10 years from now. Hopefully we're both still here, and you will be. And but who knows if it'll be any different. We've got a scoot. So I'm going to sign off with our eloquently, I hope, stated outro, and then we'll roll. If you enjoy the podcast, what a start. Please leave a review and a 5-star rating. 5 stars is a must. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And every one of these always includes wherever you get your podcasts. I don't know why everybody uses that, but they do. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email me at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll read it on the show. We've gotten so many questions this year that we have yet to read one on the show. So please send one. You can follow me on Twitter I don't know my Twitter handle, at Rob Vanstone, or Murray at Murray LP. And as always, please do not send Murray Mandrick tweets to Murray McCormick. We have 2 different Murray M's at the LP. Anything you want to say before we sign off, Murray?
No, I'm just, kind of looking forward to seeing Nathan Rourke play, which is kind of says something about 19. We kind of wanted to see what Cody Fajardo would do in 19, and now we're trying to see what the opposing quarterback's going to do. So does that Perfect. Say the way things have changed?
Does it ever? For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks for being with us as always.